What if one quiet moment could expose the truth about who we really are? Picture this: an elegant, elderly woman, boarding pass in hand, settles into her first-class seat. She's calm, polite, and dignified. But then, a flight attendant leans in and says the words that freeze the entire cabin. "You don't belong here." It's not about a mistake. It's about judgment, about the silent weight of prejudice that still lives in everyday moments. Now ask yourself, if it were your mother, sitting there being humiliated in front of strangers, what would you do? Would you stay calm? Would you fight back? And what if the woman they insulted, the one they tried to push out of first class, turned out to be the mother of the airline CEO? In that instant, the story changes from humiliation to revelation, from bias to accountability, from silence to power. This isn't just a story about race or class. It's about dignity, about how grace, even when tested, can shake an entire system awake. Stay until the end, because this one moment will remind you that true power doesn't need to shout. If this story moves you, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread stories that inspire real change. The afternoon sun spilled through the wide windows of San Francisco International Airport, turning the floor tiles into sheets of gold. Announcements echoed overhead, half lost in the hum of rolling suitcases and the chatter of weekend travelers. Evelyn Carter stood quietly near Gate C-17, holding her boarding pass in one hand and a paperback in the other. She was 68, silver hair pinned neatly, pearl earrings small but luminous. Her tan wool coat hung open over a soft cream blouse. To most people, she looked like someone's gentle music teacher on vacation. Only a few would guess she was the mother of the man who owned the airline she was about to board. She didn't like special treatment, never had. Her son, Darius Carter, had offered her a private jet for the trip to New York. She refused. "I want to fly like everyone else," she'd said over the phone that morning. "I want to see what your passengers feel." Darius had laughed. "Then promise me you'll call if anything goes wrong." She promised. Now she watched the digital board flash Liberty Air 217 on time. She smiled and adjusted her glasses. Everything felt ordinary, even peaceful. When the gate agent announced first-class boarding, Evelyn walked forward with small, steady steps. She handed her ticket to a young woman in a crisp Navy uniform, Clara Hayes, lead flight attendant for the flight. Clara scanned the barcode, frowned, and looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am, this says seat 1A. Yes, that's correct." Clara tilted her head. "Are you sure that seat's reserved for our premium flyers?" "I am one," Evelyn said softly, pulling out her Liberty Air membership card. Clara's smile tightened. "Of course. Sometimes the system glitches. Let me double-check." Evelyn waited. The people behind her shifted impatiently. She could feel their eyes. A man in a gray suit muttered, "Always something to hold up the line." Clara typed for a while, sighed dramatically, then looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this ticket looks like an upgrade error. You'll need to step aside while I clear it up." Evelyn's calm wavered. "I purchased it directly from Liberty's site. Full fare." "Uh-huh," Clara said, not looking at her. "I just don't see that in our elite roster." A flush rose to Evelyn's cheeks. She glanced around. Several passengers were staring. She reached into her bag for a printed receipt, hands slightly trembling from arthritis. While she searched, her glasses slipped from her face and clattered to the floor. Clara bent, picked them up, and placed them on the counter with a thud. "Let's just not hold everyone up. Okay, I'll have someone look into this downstairs." The man in the gray suit laughed under his breath. "Some people always want to sneak into first class." Evelyn felt the words like small stones against her chest. She said nothing, only reached for her glasses, but as she did, Clara's elbow caught the frame. The lenses cracked, splintering across the desk. The sound sharp, brittle cut through the airport noise. For one long second, nobody moved. Then Clara muttered, "Oh, shoot," as if she'd spilled water, not dignity. Evelyn looked at the broken glass in her palm, the thin silver line of blood where a shard had nicked her skin. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her throat ached. Clara waved over another attendant. "Could you take this lady to the side while we fix her ticket?" "This lady?" the phrase echoed. Evelyn swallowed the sting of tears and stepped aside. She pressed her sleeve to her finger until the bleeding stopped. A janitor pushed his cart nearby, pausing for a moment, sympathy flickering in his eyes. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded. "Yes, thank you." The boarding line flowed past her business travelers, honeymoon couples, a mother soothing her toddler. Life went on as if nothing had happened. 15 minutes passed. Clara never looked her way again. When most passengers had boarded, Evelyn approached once more. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Has the issue been resolved?" Clara sighed. "Not yet. Security flagged the seat because of a duplicate booking. Duplicate, yes. We already have someone in 1A. Evelyn frowned. "That's impossible." Clara shrugged. "It happens. Computers. You know." The final boarding call rang. A supervisor, Tom Riley, stocky, red-faced, walked over. "What's the holdup?" he asked. Claire pointed. "This passenger's trying to claim a first-class seat that's already taken." Tom looked Evelyn up and down. "Ma'am, what's your ticket number?" She handed it to him. He didn't even glance before saying, "We'll get you a seat in row 23. Same arrival time." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I paid for 1A. Tom smiled the way people do when they want you to stop talking. "Let's avoid a scene." Around them, the last few passengers watched openly now, phones lifted discreetly. One of them, Sophia Lee, a young travel blogger with a small camera, hit record. Evelyn's voice trembled only slightly. "I'm not making a scene. I just want what I paid for." Tom turned to Clara. "Call the captain. We might need to remove her." Clara's relief was almost visible. "Copy that." Evelyn's breath caught. "Remove her," for insisting on fairness. When the captain arrived, the tension thickened. Captain Raymond Holt, tall, gray at the temples, carried himself with military precision. He looked first at the crew, then at Evelyn. "What seems to be the issue?" Clara spoke quickly. "Unauthorized upgrade, refusing to cooperate." Evelyn tried again. "Captain, I purchased—" He cut her off. "Ma'am, we'll handle it. Please step aside until we verify." His tone wasn't cruel, just final, the tone of someone who'd stopped listening. A few nearby passengers murmured. A woman whispered, "She's right. I saw her show the card." But no one intervened. Evelyn felt the quiet weight of that silence. She thought of the classrooms where she'd taught children to use their voices, to stand up for fairness. Now, surrounded by adults, she realized how rare courage truly was. The captain's radio crackled. "Security to C-17. Her stomach tightened. Security! For her. Evelyn's phone vibrated in her purse, a text from Darius. "Mom, landed safe." She stared at it for a long second, thumb hovering. She didn't want to worry him. He had a board meeting. He was steering the very company that now humiliated his mother. Clara leaned closer, voice low. "Look, ma'am, if you just take 23C, we'll get you a drink on the house." All right, Evelyn met her eyes. No, thank you. Clara rolled hers. Then I can't help you. 2 security officers appeared, one older, one young. The older man, Officer Miguel Alvarez, recognized the pain in Evelyn's face instantly. He approached carefully. Ma'am, I just need to check your boarding pass. She handed it over. He scanned it with his device. It's valid, he said quietly. Full fare. Confirmed 1A. Captain Holt frowned. There's still a duplicate in the system. Alvarez hesitated. With respect, sir, this passenger has the correct credentials. Tom Riley barked. Then the system's wrong. Escort her out so we can close the gate. The younger officer moved uncertainly. Alvarez raised a hand. Wait. But Tom's voice overrode his, now. Officer. Evelyn took a breath. Her hands no longer trembled. She looked at the sea of faces, some curious, some pitying, some just tired. She remembered her promise to Darius that morning. I'll call if anything goes wrong. She reached into her purse again, pulled out her phone, and whispered to Alvarez, May I make one call? He nodded. Of course, ma'am. She dialed a single number. It rang once. Then a deep voice answered, calm and measured. Hey, Mom. Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper. Darius, I think I need that promise now. Alvarez glanced at her, realizing who she was calling. Across the terminal, Sophia's camera light blinked red. Still recording? Clara folded her arms. Who are you calling now? We really don't have time. Evelyn lifted her head, her voice steady. My son. Clara smirked. Well, maybe he can buy you a ticket and coach. Evelyn pressed the speaker button. The phone's speaker crackled, and the calm baritone filled the gate area. This is Darius Carter, the voice said, CEO of Liberty Air. The words hung in the air like a sudden silence after thunder. Every head turned. Tom Riley's mouth fell open. Captain Holt froze mid-step. Even Clara's confident posture wilted. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. Not in triumph, but in quiet disbelief that it had come to this. Darius's voice continued, slow, deliberate. Who am I speaking with? No one answered. Only the sound of distant announcements and someone's phone buzzing filled the space. The chapter of humiliation was about to end, but not the lesson it carried. Evelyn sat down calmly in the nearest chair, holding the phone steady. Her reflection in the cracked lenses glimmered like 2 small shards of truth. And as the camera of a stranger captured her composure, the internet began to stir. For a long moment after Darius Carter's voice echoed through the speaker, no one at Gate C-17 moved. The noise of the terminal seemed to fall away, replaced by an almost physical quiet. Then, as if to fill that silence, the public address system announced another flight boarding nearby, and the crowd exhaled. Phones came up again. Someone whispered. Did he say CEO Evelyn sat very still, the cracked lenses of her glasses folded neatly in her lap? She did not gloat or glare. She simply breathed. Her son's voice had changed the air around her, but it had not changed the truth of what had just happened. Across from her, Clara Hayes looked frozen in place, her jaw tight, eyes darting toward the captain for help. Tom Riley rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly unsure of what to do. On the other end of the phone, Darius spoke again, calm but firm. Captain Holt, are you at the gate yet? Yes, sir, the captain replied automatically, his voice cracking through the small speaker. Then you'll make sure my mother boards the seat she purchased. 1A, no further delay. Yes, sir. Darius' tone softened slightly. Thank you. I'll be in touch with headquarters in 5 minutes. Then the call ended. Evelyn looked up at the faces around her. Some people smiled nervously, pretending they had not just been spectators. Others looked away. Tom cleared his throat and gestured stiffly toward the jet bridge. "Ma'am, please, go ahead." Evelyn rose slowly, every motion precise, graceful. She picked up her handbag and walked past them without a word. Officer Miguel Alvarez stepped aside to let her through, nodding respectfully. "Have a safe flight, ma'am." "Thank you, officer," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Inside the jet bridge, the air felt cooler, quieter, but the humiliation clung to her like static. She found her seat 1A, buckled herself in, and stared out the window. Outside, ground crew waved orange wands, guiding the last carts of luggage. The sun was sinking toward the bay, throwing streaks of copper light across the plane's silver body. Passengers filed in behind her. A few recognized her from the scene at the gate and avoided eye contact. A man with earbuds leaned over to whisper to another, "That's her, the CEO's mom." She heard them but didn't react. Clara entered the cabin soon after, moving briskly as if speed could erase what had happened. She paused near Evelyn's seat, forced a tight smile, and asked, "Can I get you some water before takeoff?" Evelyn looked up. "No, thank you." Clara hesitated, then walked away. The cabin door closed with a metallic click. Captain Holt's voice came over the intercom, steady but subdued. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Liberty Air Flight 217 to New York. We'll be departing shortly. Please ensure your seat belts are fastened." Evelyn let her hands rest on her lap. She could still feel the faint sting from the cut on her finger where the glass had nicked her earlier. It throbbed gently with each heartbeat, a small reminder that dignity sometimes bled quietly. As the plane began to taxi, Clara performed the safety demonstration. Her words were crisp but mechanical, her gaze never landing on the woman in 1A. Evelyn noticed, but she didn't mind. Forgiveness was not instant. It was practice. The takeoff was smooth, the engines roaring beneath them, pressing everyone into their seats. As the plane lifted above the clouds, the world below turned into a soft quilt of orange and blue. Evelyn stared through the window, letting the rhythm of the flight steady her. Half an hour later, Clara returned with the drink cart. She paused beside 1A again, eyes careful. "Would you like anything now, Mrs. Carter?" Evelyn looked up, mildly surprised she knew her name. "Tea, please. Chamomile, if you have it." "Of course." Clara poured hot water, set the cup down gently. The china rattled slightly in her hand. "Ma'am." About earlier, Evelyn stopped her softly. "You don't need to explain. Not yet." Clara swallowed, nodded, and moved on. Behind them, murmurs spread through the cabin. Passengers had seen the viral clip. Sophia Lee had uploaded it minutes after takeoff. Notifications pinged across devices. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "It's already at 50,000 views." Evelyn didn't know. She simply sipped her tea, eyes distant. The warm liquid steadied her breath. She had spent her life teaching music, 40 years of listening, of coaxing courage out of trembling voices. Yet here, 30,000 feet above the ground, it was her silence that felt like a lesson. Back in the galley, Clara stood with her back against the counter, scrolling her phone. Her feed was exploding with comments. "Racist flight attendant embarrasses elderly black woman." Her stomach twisted. She locked the screen and pressed her palms against the cold metal. Captain Holt's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Clara, when we land, corporate wants a full incident report." She closed her eyes. "Yes, sir." The flight continued in uneasy quiet. When the meal service began, Clara approached 1A again. Evelyn was reading now. Her cracked glasses balanced precariously on her nose. Dinner options are grilled salmon or pasta primavera. Evelyn smiled faintly. Salmon, please. Clara served the plate. Hesitated again. Mrs. Carter. I. Evelyn glanced up. Yes. Clara's throat tightened. I didn't mean for things to go that way. Evelyn studied her for a long second. Then why did they? The question was gentle, not accusing. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, looked down. I don't know. Sometimes I just assume. I shouldn't have. Evelyn nodded, then turned back to her food. Assumption is the quiet root of cruelty, she said softly. We all have to pull it out before it grows. Clara swallowed hard, whispered, Yes, ma'am, and moved away. In the cockpit. Captain Holt stared at the blinking panel of instruments but heard every word. He had daughters near Clara's age. He imagined one of them making the same mistake, and shame pricked at him like heat beneath his collar. The hours passed. The lights dimmed. The hum of the engines became a steady heartbeat. Evelyn rested her head back, half asleep, half awake. In her dreams, she heard her late husband's voice, warm and teasing. You always said respect was a kind of music. Evie, keep playing it. She woke with tears drying on her cheeks. When the plane began its descent toward New York, the cabin lights brightened. Clara's face looked drawn, pale under the soft glow. She approached one last time with a folded napkin. On it, a small note written in tidy script. I'm sorry, truly. Thank you for your grace. Evelyn accepted it with a nod. No more words were needed. As they landed, applause broke out not for the crew, but for the sense of relief that the long, tense journey had ended without another scene. Passengers rose, collecting their bags, eyes flicking toward 1A again. Evelyn waited until everyone else had gone. She liked to leave quietly, always had. At the door, Captain Holt stood waiting. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice low. I owe you an apology. I trusted the wrong instincts today. Evelyn looked at him, calm as still water. Then trust better ones tomorrow. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Outside. The night air at JFK was cool, edged with the smell of jet fuel and rain. A black sedan waited by the curb, a driver standing straight. She climbed in, closed the door, exhaled. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Darius' mom. Are you all right? She typed back, I'm fine. Go easy on him. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then his reply, we'll talk in the morning. Back at Liberty Air headquarters in Dallas. Darius sat alone in his office, the city lights stretching out below like a circuit board. The viral video was already on his screen, headlines multiplying faster than he could read them. He rubbed his temples. He knew what tomorrow would bring press, outrage, shareholders, a demand for answers. But beneath the anger was something else, disappointment. The airline he had built to represent equality had just humiliated his own mother. He opened a new document on his computer and began typing a directive. Immediate review of employee conduct at SFO. Mandatory ethics and empathy training. Report due within 24 hours. His assistant messaged him. Sir, should we suspend the staff involved? Darius stared at the blinking cursor, remembering his mother's voice. Go easy on them. After a pause, he typed back, Not yet. We teach before we punish. The office clock ticked past midnight. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windows. Darius leaned back, eyes closed. He could still hear his mother's calm tone at the gate, the steadiness that had silenced chaos. Strength, he thought, wasn't about volume. It was about control, across the country. Evelyn placed her cracked glasses on the nightstand of her hotel room. She sat on the bed, hands folded, and whispered a prayer not for vengeance, but for learning. Somewhere deep down, she hoped the next morning would begin a different kind of reckoning, not one born of fury, but of understanding. She turned off the light. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the city streets, but inside the room there was peace. The world, however, was wide awake. On every screen, the story of the woman in seat 1A was spreading, and by dawn, Liberty Air would face a storm far larger than turbulence. Morning light spilled across the Manhattan skyline like pale honey when Darius Carter stepped out of the black car in front of Liberty Air's New York headquarters. The night had been sleepless. Every major outlet had run the same headline: Black CEO's mother denied first-class seat on his own airline. The clip from Sophia Lee's phone had crossed 2 million views before sunrise. By 8 a.m. Stock analysts were debating whether it would damage investor trust. Darius didn't care about the market right now. He cared about his mother. He rode the elevator in silence, hands folded in front of him. His reflection multiplied in the mirrored walls. He looked calm, but his mind was heavy. His assistant, Maya Carter, waited by the conference room door, eyes tired from reading social media comments all night. "It's everywhere." "Darius," she said softly. "CNN, The Post, even BBC. They're calling it the Seat 1A incident." He sighed, the kind of sigh that came not from exhaustion, but from deep disappointment. "Then let's make sure what they see next is how we respond." Inside the boardroom, his executives waited, whispering until he entered. Screens displayed paused frames from the video the moment his mother sat quietly while Clara and Tom towered over her. The image alone spoke louder than any memo. Darius set his briefcase down, scanned their faces, then spoke. "What happened yesterday wasn't just a mistake. It was a mirror, and it showed us something we can't ignore." No one answered. He continued, "We built Liberty Air on 3 words: fairness, dignity, and trust. Yesterday, all 3 were broken at Gate C-17. His voice never rose, yet everyone sat straighter. "Effective immediately. All operations at San Francisco will pause for internal review. Every employee involved will be interviewed by end of day. But before we decide consequences, I want to understand cause." The head of human resources cleared his throat. The gate staff followed protocol. "Sir." A duplicate booking error triggered an alert. They didn't realize who Darius cut him off gently. They didn't need to know who. They needed to know how to treat a person. Silence filled the room again. He turned to Maya. "Where's Mom?" "She's at the hotel. I asked her to rest." He nodded. "Good. Keep her off the internet." His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it at first, but it rang again. He stepped aside, answered quietly. "Mr. Carter, this is Captain Holt." The voice was nervous but respectful. Darius said, "Go ahead, Captain. I just wanted to apologize personally. I should have stepped in sooner. I let my judgment get clouded by hierarchy and assumptions. I'm ready to accept any consequence." Darius paused. "Then start by helping me fix what's broken." "Yes, sir. Anything you need." He ended the call, feeling a faint thread of relief. There was at least one man willing to face himself. By noon, Liberty Air's statement went live. "We are deeply sorry for the incident at SFO. We are conducting a full investigation and reaffirming our commitment to equality for all passengers." The public response was swift, split between outrage and praise. Some demanded firings. Others admired Darius's calm tone. But Darius knew the internet's fury could destroy or rebuild, depending on what came next. He booked the earliest flight back to San Francisco. This time, there would be no quiet ride in first class. He sat among the crowd, laptop open, headphones off, listening to people talk. Two businessmen beside him discussed that crazy airline story. One said, "I mean, can you imagine the CEO's own mother?" The other laughed. "Bet someone's getting fired today." Darius looked out the window. Firing's easy, he thought. Changing hearts is the hard part. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat in her hotel room in Oakland, the morning sun touching her cheek through the curtains. She hadn't looked at the internet. She didn't need to. People had already called, texted, offered sympathy or outrage. She didn't want either. She wanted quiet. She wanted to think. She held her phone loosely in her hand, the same phone that had turned a humiliating moment into national news. Its screen still showed her last message to her son, "Go easy on them." She smiled faintly at her own stubbornness. For years she had taught children that mercy was stronger than punishment. Now she had to live that lesson under the world's microscope. A soft knock at her door broke the silence. When she opened it, Officer Miguel Alvarez stood there, hat in hand, still in his uniform. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I'm sorry to intrude, but I wanted to see if you're all right." Evelyn's surprise melted into warmth. "Officer Alvarez, you didn't have to come." "I did," he said. "I saw how wrong it was. I've seen it before. Too many times. But yesterday, it hit different." She motioned for him to sit. "Because it was filmed." He shook his head. "Because you didn't yell. You just stood there. That silence." He stopped, searching for the right words. It made everyone else hear what they were doing. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Silence can be loud when it carries truth. He nodded. "If it means anything. I spoke to corporate investigators this morning. I told them exactly what I saw." "Thank you," she said softly. "But I don't want revenge. I want reflection." "I think that's what your son wants too," Alvarez said. When he left, she sat for a while, the phone heavy in her palm. Reflection. Yes, but maybe reflection needed to shine where everyone could see. By late afternoon, the hotel lobby buzzed with reporters. Evelyn slipped out through a side exit with sunglasses on, not to hide, but to breathe. The air outside smelled of salt and car exhaust. She walked 2 blocks to a small cafe she used to visit when she lived nearby. The owner, an elderly man named Peter, recognized her immediately. "Evelyn Carter. I haven't seen you in years." She smiled. "I guess I've been on the news." He chuckled gently. "Then let me get you a cup of that cinnamon tea you like. On the house." As she sat at the corner table, she thought about Darius as a boy, how he'd come home from school once, furious after a teacher had mistaken him for a janitor's son. He'd been 12. She had told him, "People will mistake your worth when they can't see your soul. Don't correct them with anger. Correct them with excellence." She smiled at the memory, unaware that the same lesson would echo back decades later through his calm voice on that plane. Across the country, at Liberty Air headquarters. Darius's private phone rang again. This time it was Clara Hayes. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Carter, I know I don't have the right to call you, but I wanted to apologize directly. I'm not asking for my job. She broke off, her breath shaky. I saw the footage. I can't believe that was me. Darius listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Do you understand why it happened?" "I thought I was protecting the company's rules," she said. "But really I was protecting my own comfort. I looked at your mother and saw what people once saw in me when I was poor, and I wanted to feel above that for once." Her honesty caught him off guard. He took a long breath. "If you truly understand, then there's still value in your voice. I'll have HR contact you. I'm not promising a return, but I am promising a hearing." Claire exhaled, voice trembling. "Thank you, sir. And please tell your mother I'm sorry." When the call ended, Darius looked at the framed photo on his desk, his mother standing in front of a classroom piano, smiling as children sang behind her. It was her belief in people, especially the ones who failed, that had made him who he was. He wondered if he still had that kind of belief himself. The next morning, Liberty Air organized a closed-door session with the employees from SFO. Darius flew there quietly. No press, no cameras. He walked into the training room unannounced. The staff rose instantly. Tom Riley looked pale. Clara's eyes red from crying. Darius motioned for them to sit. "I didn't come to lecture you," he said. "I came to listen." What followed wasn't easy. Tom admitted he had felt pressure to board on time. The passengers of color often triggered extra verification alerts he never questioned. Clara confessed she'd made assumptions she couldn't explain. Darius listened to each word, not taking notes, not interrupting. When they finished, he said, "Bias isn't always hate. Sometimes it's habit, and habit can be unlearned." He announced the creation of a new initiative, the Evelyn Carter Training Program, to teach empathy through real passenger stories. The room fell quiet. Clara covered her face with her hands. "You named it after her?" "Yes," Darius said, "because she showed us how dignity sounds when it refuses to shout." That evening, as he prepared to leave for his hotel, his phone buzzed again. It was his mother, a video call this time. Her smile appeared, tired but luminous. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I haven't," he admitted. She studied him. "Did you scold them?" He hesitated. "I listened." "Good," she said, her eyes warm. "Then maybe the storm will wash something clean." He smiled faintly. "Mom, do you ever regret not fighting harder when people treated you wrong?" She shook her head. "No, baby, because every time I stayed calm, I saw who they really were. And sometimes, if they were lucky, they saw it too." When the call ended, Darius leaned back in his chair and looked out at the Pacific through the glass wall. The sun was sliding down behind the hills, turning the water gold. He realized that the true weight of power wasn't in control, it was in restraint. Meanwhile, in a quiet room not far away, Clara drafted a letter of apology, not to corporate, but to Evelyn personally. She didn't know if she'd ever send it. She just knew she needed to write it, to begin her own reckoning. By midnight, the city was calm. The headlines still burned online, but the anger was starting to shift. Journalists began to write about leadership, about how Darius Carter had handled the crisis differently, and beneath all of it, Evelyn's composed face in that viral video sitting still, hands folded. The phone in her hand became a symbol of a deeper kind of strength. The world would remember that image far longer than the outrage. Evening light poured like melted bronze through the airport windows as Darius Carter boarded Flight 112 bound for Washington. Dis. It was the same route his mother had taken just 2 days before, on the same model of aircraft. The irony was not lost on him. His mother's quiet humiliation had happened here, and now he was back same gate, same airline, but with a different mission. The cabin hummed with chatter as passengers found their seats. Darius had chosen not to fly private. He wanted to be among the people, to hear the murmurs that truth leaves behind. He settled into row 12 by the window, not first class this time. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "That's him, the CEO from the video." The husband turned discreetly, his eyes widening before nodding with silent respect. Darius gave them a polite smile, neither dismissive nor encouraging, just human. At the front of the plane, Captain Raymond Holt adjusted his uniform. This time his posture was steady, his jaw set with purpose. He had requested to pilot this specific flight, his first public appearance since the incident. Clara Hayes stood near the galley, nervous but present. She had asked for a chance to serve again after weeks of suspension and reflection. Her heart pounded every time a passenger looked at her, wondering if they recognized her face from that viral clip. She was not here to defend herself. She was here to serve differently. Before takeoff, Darius received a message on his phone. It was from Evelyn. "You're flying tonight," it read. "Remember, justice sounds better when spoken softly." He smiled at the message. Then, as the engines rumbled, he put the phone away. Halfway through the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin lightly. Clara moved down the aisle, collecting empty cups. When she reached row 12, she froze. Seeing Darius in a passenger seat ordinary, unguarded, made her chest tighten. "Mr. Carter," she whispered. You may," he interrupted gently. "You're doing fine." The kindness in his tone disarmed her more than anger could have. She nodded, her voice trembling. "I wrote your mother a letter. I haven't sent it yet." "Then you should," he said, "because regret only turns into growth when you let someone read it." Clara bit her lip and nodded again, feeling something shift inside her, something heavy leaving room for air. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are cruising at 35,000 feet. Tonight's flight is a special one. We're carrying not only passengers, but also a moment that changed our company." Murmurs filled the cabin. Darius looked up. Holt continued. "2 days ago, an incident happened on one of our flights. It hurt many people, including someone we all respect. I was the pilot on that flight, and I failed to protect the dignity of a woman who deserved nothing but respect." The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed softer. Darius's pulse slowed. He hadn't expected this. Holt's voice wavered slightly. "I asked to fly tonight because apologies don't matter if they stay hidden. Mrs. Evelyn Carter taught us something without saying a word, that silence can reveal the noise in our hearts. I want to thank her, and her son, for reminding us who we are supposed to be." There was a pause, then spontaneous applause rippled through the cabin. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. The passengers clapped louder, some standing, some wiping their eyes. Darius didn't move. He just closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him like wind through leaves. "When the applause faded," Holt added, "we are introducing new standards, real training, real listening, because every seat, from 1A to 42C, belongs to someone who matters." When the flight landed, the air inside the cabin felt lighter. Passengers approached Darius quietly, shaking his hand or simply nodding. Clara lingered at the exit door as everyone disembarked. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, "I'll send that letter tonight." "I'll look forward to it," he replied. As he stepped off the plane, Flashes erupted. Journalists had gathered by the gate. One shouted, "Mr. Carter, was that your mother's idea to make Captain Holt speak?" He smiled faintly. "No, it was his own. That's how change begins." Outside, the evening rain had started a soft drizzle that glazed the tarmac silver. Evelyn was waiting at the terminal, wrapped in a navy coat, her silver hair catching the light. When she saw her son, she didn't speak. She simply opened her arms. He hugged her tightly, the kind of embrace that held both exhaustion and gratitude. "You watched?" he asked. "I did," she said. He found his voice. Darius nodded. So did we. Later that night, mother and son sat in the quiet of the hotel lounge. The world outside was still buzzing with the captain's speech, social media flooding with clips from passengers who had recorded it. The voice threw. The cabin trended worldwide. But Evelyn wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in what people would feel. "You know what moved me most," she said. "It wasn't the apology. It was the listening. You can tell when someone listens with shame or with hope. Today I heard hope." Darius smiled. "Then maybe we're getting somewhere." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You've always believed systems could change. I used to think hearts couldn't, but maybe both can if one starts the other." The next morning, Liberty Air held a press conference streamed globally. Darius stood behind the podium, with Evelyn sitting quietly in the front row. The hall was full of reporters, lights glaring. He began simply, "This is not about damage control. It's about moral repair." The room stilled. He went on to outline a new policy, one that required empathy training led by real passengers who had experienced discrimination, anonymous reporting channels for staff, and an independent ethics board named after his mother, the Evelyn Carter Council for Human Dignity. As he spoke, the tone wasn't corporate, but human. "We fly millions every year," he said. "But if even one person feels smaller because of us, we have failed our mission. From today forward, dignity isn't a promise, it's a procedure." Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the middle of that noise, Evelyn's eyes filled with quiet pride. After the conference, a young journalist approached Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter, can I ask why didn't you fight back that day?" She smiled gently. "Because sometimes stillness is louder than shouting. Sometimes you need to let the world hear its own echo." The interview aired that evening, her calm words resonating far beyond the story itself. Within 24 hours, Liberty Air's message had spread to universities, churches, and even government panels discussing ethical leadership. People didn't just see a company changing, they saw a family showing what change looked like. That night, as Evelyn prepared for bed, she received an email notification. It was from Clara. The subject line read, "For Mrs. Carter." Evelyn opened it. The message was short, heartfelt, written with trembling sincerity. "I can't undo what I did, but because of you, I will never see silence the same way again. Thank you for forgiving before I even asked." Evelyn closed the laptop slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. She whispered to herself, "That's how it begins, in another part of the city." Darius looked out from his office window. Rain streaked across the glass, reflecting the city lights below. He thought about the strange symmetry of it all, a story that began with one denied seat, now turning into a movement about worth and respect. The turbulence had passed, but the message was still ascending. He sent one final text to his mother. "Tomorrow, I'll fly home. First class, but only if you're sitting beside me." Her reply came seconds later. "Only if you let me pay for my own ticket." He laughed softly, shaking his head. The following morning, as dawn painted the horizon pale gold, Darius realized the truth power didn't come from ownership. It came from stewardship. The airline wasn't his to control. It was his to care for. And maybe, just maybe, the world had learned something from the woman who had never needed to raise her voice to make history. The days that followed were a whirlwind of praise and politics. News anchors called it the calm revolution in the skies. Liberty Air's stock rebounded faster than analysts predicted, not because of sympathy, but because the public trusted what they had seen: a leader who acted with conscience, not calculation. Yet Darius Carter knew that behind every cheer there lingered a whisper of doubt. Change declared in microphones was easy. Change sustained in silence was the real test. He sat in his office one late evening, lights dimmed, reading letters that had poured in from across the country. Some came from passengers sharing their own stories of discrimination. Others came from flight attendants thanking him for giving them permission to speak up. But one letter, written in elegant cursive on old stationery, stood out. It was from a retired pilot named James Morgan. Mr. Carter. It began, "I was once grounded for defending a passenger of color in 1983. They told me it wasn't my place. It's good to see, 40 years later, that someone made it his." Darius read it twice. Then he placed it beside the framed photo of his mother. It was always her place. He whispered. That same night, Evelyn was at home in Oakland, curled in her armchair with a soft blanket around her shoulders. Outside, thunder rolled over the bay. Her phone buzzed with notifications, interviews, articles, talk shows quoting her words. But she ignored them. She was thinking about Clara's email, the quiet apology that had carried more sincerity than all the public statements combined. Evelyn had replied earlier that day with a simple message. Redemption doesn't erase the past, but it lights the way forward. Keep walking. A sudden knock startled her. When she opened the door, Captain Holt stood there, drenched from rain, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I wanted to thank you in person, not as a pilot, but as a man who forgot how to see." She ushered him inside, handing him a towel. "You saw yourself again," she said kindly. "That's the beginning." They sat for nearly an hour talking not about the flight, but about humanity, pressure, fear, and how power could sometimes blind the ones meant to protect. Meanwhile, across the city, Clara Hayes sat alone in a diner, sipping black coffee. The world had forgiven Liberty Air, but she was still learning how to forgive herself. Every time she saw Evelyn's calm face in the news, her chest tightened. She had started volunteering at a local community center, teaching young people about service etiquette and empathy. When the local news crew came to interview her, she refused. "I don't want attention," she said. "I just want to earn back the silence I broke." By the end of that week, Liberty Air launched the Evelyn Carter Council. Reporters filled the press hall again, but this time Darius stood beside a diverse panel of employees, pilots, attendants, passengers, even Officer Miguel Alvarez. The council's goal was simple: listen first, act second. "We are building something that outlives headlines," Darius said, "because public shame fades, but quiet respect endures." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Yet in the middle of the noise, Darius felt a strange unease. That night, while reviewing operational reports, he noticed a message flagged by corporate security. It was anonymous, but the tone was sharp, resentful. "Some of us don't want to work for a company run by guilt." His stomach tightened. For the first time, he sensed that beneath the applause, there was still a storm, a current of bitterness, waiting. He printed the message and kept it on his desk as a reminder. True reform would be messy, uncomfortable, even resisted. But if he had learned anything from his mother, it was that stillness could outlast chaos. 2 weeks later, Liberty Air hosted a training summit at its Los Angeles hub. Over 500 staff members attended. Evelyn was invited as keynote speaker, though she hesitated at first. "They don't need to hear from an old teacher," she told Darius. He smiled. "They need to hear from the woman who taught me how to lead." When she walked onto the stage, applause filled the hall. She wore a simple cream suit, her silver hair glowing under the lights. "I'm not here to lecture you," she began softly. "I'm here to remind you why you started doing this work to carry people safely from one place to another. That's not just logistics, that's care, and care requires humility." Her voice was gentle, but her words carried steel. You can follow every rule and still fail at kindness. You can meet every metric and still miss the soul of service. The room fell utterly still. Then Evelyn shared a story from her teaching days, how one of her students, a shy boy who never spoke, had once left her a note that said, "Thank you for seeing me before anyone else did." She paused. That's all people ever want to be seen. When she finished, the crowd stood as one. Even the executives wiped their eyes. But among them, Darius saw the few who clapped out of obligation, not conviction. He didn't judge them. He simply noted them. Every revolution, he knew, began with reluctant witnesses. Later that night, as mother and son walked outside, the Los Angeles air warm and still, Evelyn said quietly, "You look worried. Some people aren't ready," he admitted. "Then give them time," she said. "Even rain takes a while to reach the roots." He smiled faintly. "You always have a proverb ready." She laughed softly. "That's what mothers do. We turn pain into reminders." Back at headquarters, new protocols rolled out across every division. Passenger complaints dropped by nearly 40%. Employee engagement rose. Yet Darius refused to celebrate too early. He knew that success could dull urgency. So he kept the anonymous note pinned to his wall, right above the letter from the old pilot. One reminded him of resistance, the other of purpose. One afternoon, while reviewing schedules, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Carter," a voice said. "This is Senator Elaine Foster. We're forming a congressional hearing on aviation bias. We'd like you and your mother to testify." He hesitated. Public hearings were political theaters. Sincerity often got drowned in sound bites. But then he thought of the children, the passengers, the silent witnesses who had found courage because of Evelyn's calm face. "We'll be there," he said, that night as he prepared his remarks. Evelyn called. "Don't make it about the airline," she advised. "Make it about the air itself, the kind we all breathe, the invisible kind that either lifts us or chokes us." Darius chuckled. "You always find poetry in everything." "It's not poetry, son. It's perspective." He closed his laptop, walked to the window, and looked at the city below planes, taking off like sparks across the horizon. He thought about all the faces on board, unseen, unjudged, carried across the sky by people trying to do better. Maybe that was the lesson all along, not perfection, but progress. The marble halls of the Capitol gleamed under the morning sun, and the air carried a kind of electric tension. Darius Carter walked beside his mother through the long corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone like soft percussion. Cameras waited at every corner, reporters murmuring into microphones. It had been 3 months since the incident at Gate C-17, and the world was still talking about it. Today would be the first time Evelyn Carter spoke publicly before lawmakers. Inside the hearing room, rows of people filled the seats: pilots, flight attendants, journalists, and citizens who had traveled from across the country. The committee chair, Senator Elaine Foster, adjusted her glasses as she looked over her notes. "This session," she began, "is not about assigning blame. It's about examining systems that allow dignity to fail at 30,000 feet. Evelyn sat straight, her cream jacket pressed neatly, her eyes calm but alert. Darius sat beside her in a dark suit, his composure steady. Yet inside his chest, his heart drummed a rhythm of both pride and nerves. Cameras clicked softly as Senator Foster called the first witness. It was Clara Hayes. Clara walked to the table, her hands trembling slightly. Her voice cracked at first, but grew steadier. "I was the flight attendant in that video," she said. "I've had months to think about what I did. I thought I was following policy, but really, I was following prejudice. I didn't know I had. It wasn't hatred. It was blindness. And Mrs. Carter's silence forced me to see. The audience listened intently. Even the senators who had entered with skepticism leaned forward. Clara finished with a trembling breath. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to live worthy of it." Evelyn's eyes glistened. She wanted to stand up and hug her, but she waited. It wasn't her turn yet. Then came Captain Raymond Holt. His voice carried authority, but his words were humble. "That day, I thought neutrality was professionalism. I was wrong. Neutrality in the face of injustice isn't neutral, it's complicit. I've flown for 30 years. But that was the first time I realized flying people isn't just about safety, it's about respect." His words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the chamber. Finally, Senator Foster called, "Mrs. Evelyn Carter." The room rose as she approached. She didn't seem to notice. She adjusted the microphone and smiled gently. "Good morning," she said. "I've been called a victim, but I'm not one. I'm a mother, a teacher, and a traveler who happened to be reminded that the sky can reveal more than clouds." A quiet laugh rippled through the room, easing the tension. She continued, her voice steady, carrying both warmth and weight. "I didn't speak that day because sometimes words can't teach what silence can. Silence forces people to hear themselves." A senator asked, "Mrs. Carter, what do you want to see change?" Evelyn paused. "I want to see humanity restored where policy has replaced compassion. I want every person, no matter their color, accent, or seat number, to be treated like someone's mother." She looked toward Claire and Holt. "And I want those who falter to have the chance to stand again. Accountability should fix what's broken, not destroy what's human." Applause filled the room, breaking protocol. Even the committee chair didn't stop it. When it was Darius's turn, he began quietly. "My mother taught me that leadership is not about control, it's about care. What happened that day forced me to confront not just my company's failures, but my own assumptions about progress. We cannot automate empathy or legislate decency. We must model it." He then announced a new national initiative, the Open Skies Project, a collaboration among airlines to create a shared database of incidents and training programs focused on equity and emotional intelligence. Senator Foster nodded, impressed. "Mr. Carter, your company turned a moment of shame into a movement of reform. How did you manage that?" He looked at his mother and said, "By listening to someone who taught me that calm is not weakness, it's power without noise." The chamber erupted again, flashes from cameras painting the air white. But the most powerful image wasn't Darius speaking, it was Evelyn, sitting beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm, her expression both proud and peaceful. After the hearing ended, reporters surrounded them in the hallway. One called out, "Mrs. Carter, do you think justice was served?" She smiled. "Justice isn't a verdict, it's a direction." That night, clips from the hearing flooded every network. Hashtags trended again. The Carters. Dignity in the sky. Open Skies Project. People across the country posted their own travel stories, times they had felt unseen, times they had been helped by strangers, times silence had spoken louder than words. The Carters' calm had awakened something collective, the hunger for decency. Back home, Darius and Evelyn sat in the living room, lights low, a quiet jazz record playing. "You handled it well," she said softly. "So did you." He replied, "The world finally got to hear your voice." Evelyn chuckled. "They didn't hear my voice. They heard our story, the kind that doesn't end in punishment, but in possibility." He leaned back, closing his eyes. "I used to think power meant making people listen. Now I know it's about making people think." Outside, the sky was clear, moonlight shimmering on the bay. The world was still noisy, full of debates and disagreements, but somewhere above, thousands of passengers were flying in quiet cabins, maybe sitting beside strangers they now saw a little differently. Evelyn looked out the window and whispered, "Every journey begins the same way, with someone deciding to sit beside another human being and stay." Months passed, and the storm that had once shaken Liberty Air began to settle into something deeper change that was no longer loud, but living. Darius Carter spent his mornings visiting training centers, listening to young recruits recite the new pledge of conduct. He stood at the back of classrooms, unnoticed. Hearing voices say words his mother had inspired: "Dignity is not a privilege, it's a standard." Each time he heard it, his chest tightened, not with pride, but with humility. Across the nation, other airlines joined the Open Skies Project. Old rivals became reluctant partners. Policies were rewritten, not by executives in suits, but by attendants, passengers, and crew who had lived through bias firsthand. The media still followed Darius's every move, but what mattered most to him was what the cameras couldn't see: the quiet corrections happening behind every boarding gate, every polite exchange that replaced suspicion with trust. At home in Oakland, Evelyn's life had become unexpectedly public. Strangers sent letters, students asked for interviews, and churches requested that she speak at community gatherings. She declined most invitations, preferring her small garden and the company of her late husband's old records. Yet one invitation she couldn't ignore came from a local high school, where a group of students wanted her to speak on courage and silence. That morning, she stood in a modest auditorium filled with restless teenagers. Instead of giving a speech, she sat on a stool and began softly. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the strength to stay kind when the world expects you to shout. She told them about that day at Gate C-17, how humiliation could have broken her, but didn't. "You don't have to be powerful to change the world," she said. "You just have to stay human when others forget how." When she finished, the students rose one by one to applaud. Many had tears in their eyes, not from sadness, but from the recognition of something true. Meanwhile, Clara Hayes had found a new path. She was now leading Liberty Air's compassion training program. Her first class was filled with skeptical new hires. She began the session by showing the viral clip of Evelyn's quiet composure. "That woman changed my life," she said softly. "I ruined her morning, and she changed my soul." Her voice caught, but she didn't hide it. If you ever face a moment where your rulebook and your conscience disagree, listen to your conscience. It will never need an apology later. The room fell still. No one looked away. Back at Liberty Air headquarters, Darius received the first quarterly report from the Open Skies Project. Complaints of racial discrimination had fallen by 60%. More importantly, customer satisfaction surveys spoke less about comfort and more about kindness. One note from a passenger simply said, "It felt safe to be seen." He printed it and taped it beside his desk. But the story wasn't over. One evening, he sat on his balcony overlooking the bay, sipping coffee as twilight settled. His phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Carter," a voice said, hesitant. "My name is Andrew Blake. I was the security supervisor that day at SFO." I froze when I saw what was happening. I didn't speak up. Darius said nothing for a moment. The voice on the line trembled. "I've carried that guilt. I wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. You gave people like me a second chance to be better." Darius leaned back, letting the words sink in. "Then use that chance," he said. "The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs people who learn." After the call, he sat in silence, the sound of distant planes humming across the sky. For the first time, he noticed how steady the rhythm was, an orchestra of engines and wind, of people going places, unaware of the small revolutions that kept them safe. A few weeks later, he took his mother on a flight together for the first time since the incident. When they arrived at the airport, the check-in clerk recognized them immediately. "Mrs. Carter," the young woman said with a bright smile. "It's an honor." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Let's just hope we make it to our seats this time." The clerk laughed nervously, but Evelyn's gentle tone eased her. On board, passengers turned to whisper as they passed, but this time the looks were not of judgment. They were of admiration. As they settled into their seats in 1A and 1B, Darius looked around. Every attendant greeted them with genuine warmth, not obligation. He could feel the difference, and so could his mother. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected. Midway through the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Holt. On behalf of Liberty Air, I want to welcome a very special passenger, Mrs. Evelyn Carter."
Her Grace reminded us all what it means to fly with heart. The cabin erupted in applause. Evelyn covered her face, embarrassed but moved. She leaned toward her son and whispered, "You planned this, didn't you?" He smiled. "Not this time." When the applause faded, a quiet settled over the cabin, a peace that felt earned. Evelyn gazed out the window at the clouds drifting below. "You know," she said softly, "when I was younger, I used to think the sky was too big for people like us, too distant. But maybe it was waiting for us to claim our place." Darius looked at her, his eyes reflecting the soft blue of the horizon. "The sky belongs to everyone. Mom always did." The rest of the flight passed in calm silence. No arguments, no looks, just the steady hum of engines carrying hundreds of souls toward tomorrow. When they landed, Darius helped his mother down the steps, sunlight glinting off the tarmac. Reporters waited nearby, but he raised his hand politely and said, "No interviews today. We're just traveling home." He guided her toward the terminal, her hand resting lightly on his arm. As they walked,
Evelyn turned and looked back at the plane, its logo gleaming under the sun. "Funny," she murmured, "how something that once hurt can become something that heals." Darius smiled. "That's because pain doesn't define the story, it starts it." And as the cameras clicked from a distance, neither of them posed. They just kept walking, side by side, through the golden light, into a future they had quietly reshaped together. True strength doesn't always shout, it listens. Evelyn Carter's story reminds us that dignity isn't something others give us. It's something we must hold on to, even when the world tries to take it away. In her silence, she didn't surrender. She taught. Her composure became a mirror that forced others to see their reflection clearly. We live in a time where outrage speaks louder than empathy. But Evelyn showed that stillness can be an act of defiance, and forgiveness a form of leadership. Her son, Darius, proved that power isn't about revenge, it's about responsibility. Together, they turned humiliation into healing and anger into awareness. For older generations watching this, her story whispers a truth you already know deep inside, that grace is not weakness, and patience is not passivity. Both are forms of courage that build bridges long after words fade. In every unfair moment you've endured, remember Evelyn Carter, because your calm may be the lesson the world needs most. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. If it touched something in your heart, if it reminded you of a time you were misunderstood, or a moment you chose grace over anger, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories that heal, inspire, and remind the world that respect is the greatest legacy we can leave behind. See you in the next story.